Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, welcome to Leisure Gaming. I am Leisure. Today's deck profile is going to be Predaplant. Now I know that there's a lot of branded Predaplants out there, but this one is not that. This one is a pure Predaplant deck list. Now if you've never used Predaplants, they revolve around fusion summoning, using something called Preda counters on your opponent so that way you can fusion summon with their cards. And the most difficult thing about the Predaplants is the pronunciation of their names, which I am definitely going to butcher, so I do apologize in advance. So let's get right into it. To start off the deck profile, we have one Saracenian. When your opponent monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. After damage calculation, if this card battled an opponent's monster, you can destroy that opponent's monster. If this card is destroyed by battle, or if this card is sent from the field to the grave by a card effect, you can add one Predap card from your deck to your hand. Next are two Biblisp. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand, except Biblisp. If a monster with a Preda counter is on the field, you can special summon this card from your graveyard but banish it when it leaves the field. Of course, we have our two Maxis to help with the draw power for the deck. Next are two Predaplant Clam. Monsters with a Predator counter that you use as fusion material are treated as dark. During your main phase, you can fusion summon one dark fusion monster from your extra deck using this card on the field, and monsters from your hand, field, and or monsters with a Predator counter your opponent controls as fusion material. Next are three Lonefire Blossom. Once per turn, you contribute one face-up plant monster, special summon one plant monster from your deck. This is a great way to start your combo and a great way to search things out. Next, we have two Predaplant Opry Scorpio. If this card is normal or special summon, you can send one monster from your hand to the graveyard, and then special summon one Predaplant monster from your deck except Scorpio. Next, we have one Darlingtonia Cobra. If this card is special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, you can add one Polymerization spell card or a Fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. Now, this card is primarily going to be special summoned one of two ways, either off of the Scorpio, or you have the new Fusion monster, the Predaplant Ambu. Of course, we have our two Ash Blossoms as our hand trap negates. Next are three Bofalucula. If this card is sent to the graveyard or added to the extra deck face up because it was used as fusion material, you can add one face up Dark Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand except itself. Now when this card is in the Pendulum Zone, during your main phase, you can fusion summon one Dark Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. Next are three Triantis. If this card is sent to the graveyard or added to your extra deck face up because it was used as fusion material, you can choose monsters on the field up to the number of monsters you control and place one Predator counter on each one, and if you do, any of those monsters that are level 2 or higher now become level 1. Also, while this card is in your Pendulum Zone, if you fusion summon a Dark Fusion monster, you can also use cards in your Pendulum Zones as monsters on the field as material for its fusion summoning. Going on to the spells, we have one Raigeki, one Harpy's Feather Duster, one Polymerization. Next is one Ultra Polymerization. I don't think you need more than one, and this is a really great card where you can just pay 2,000 life points to fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck using two monsters you control as fusion materials. Neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. You can then banish this card from your graveyard, then target one fusion monster that was fusion summoned with this card's effect, and special summon all the fusion materials used for its fusion summon from your graveyard, but change their attack and defense to 0 and their effects are negated. Next are three Preda Practice. Special summon one Predaplant monster from your hand, then add one Predap card from your deck to your hand. That's monster, spell, or trap. Also, for the rest of the turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters. We have one Preda Pruning. Activate this card by targeting one Predaplant monster in your graveyard and special summon it and equip it with this card. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. We have one Predaponics. Once per turn, you can special summon one level 4 or lower Predaplant monster from your hand or graveyard, but negate its effects. Once per turn, during your standby phase, pay 800 life points or destroy this card. With all the fusion summoning that we're doing, we definitely have to have our two Super Polys, where you discard one card and fusion summon one fusion monster from the extra deck using monsters from either field as fusion material, and neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. We have one Predaplast. Reveal any number of Predap cards in your hand, then target that number of face-up monsters your opponent controls and place one Predator counter on each one. And if you do, any of those monsters that are level 2 or higher become now level 1. If your Predaplant monster would be destroyed by battle, you can then banish this card from your graveyard instead. Of course, with how the meta is right now, we definitely have to have our two Call by the Graves to remove any monster from your opponent's graveyard so that way the effects are negated. One Predaprime Fusion. If a Predaplant monster is on the field, fusion summon one Dark Fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from either field as material, including two or more dark monsters you control. Next are 2 infinite impermanents, where you can target one face-up monster and negate its effects. Also, if this card was set before the activation, for the rest of the turn, all spell and traps in that column are negated. We have 1 Predaplanting, where you send 1 Predaplant monster from your deck to the graveyard, place 1 Predator counter on each face-up monster on the field, and if you do, any of those monsters that are level 2 or higher now become level 1, as long as they have that counter. If you fusion summon a dark monster while this card is in your graveyard, you could banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 card on the field and destroy it. And lastly, we have 1 Predaplant. If a monster with a Predator counter leaves the field while this card is face up on the field, add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. You can banish this card from your graveyard and fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand or field as fusion materials. Going on to the extra deck, we have 2 Predaplant Ambu, which is a card that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Cobra. If this card is fusion summoned, you can add 1 Predaplant monster or Predap spell or trap from your deck, graveyard, or face-up extra deck to your hand. You can target 1 monster your opponent controls with a Predator counter, or 1 monster you control and tribute it, and if you do, special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck. We have 1 Predaplant Chimera. Once per turn, you can target 1 monster on the field with a level less than or equal to this card and banish it. When an attack is declared involving this card and an opponent's face-up monster, you can activate this effect until the end of the turn. That monster loses 1000 attack, and if it does, this card will gain 1000 attack. Once per turn, during the next standby phase after this card was sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Polymerization spell or fusion spell from your deck to your hand. Next are 2 Starving Venom Fusion Dragons, and a lot of the cards in the deck are dark, and we have our Super Polys to use your opponent's dark monsters to get into this card a lot easier. If this card is fusion summoned, you can make this card gain attack equal to 1 opponent's special summon monster until the end of the turn. Once per turn, you can target 1 level 5 or higher monster your opponent controls until the end phase. This card's name becomes that monster's original name, and replace this effect with that monster's original effect. If this fusion summon card is destroyed, you can destroy all your opponent's special summon monsters. Next is 1 Dragostapelia. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and place 1 Predator counter on it. If it is a level 2 or higher, it now becomes a level 1. Also, negate the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that have Predator counters. 1 Supreme King Dragon Starving Venom must either be fusion summoned or special summoned by tributing the above cards, which are 2 Dark Pendulum monsters. Once per turn, you can target 1 other monster on the field or in the graveyard until the end phase. This card's name becomes that monster's original name, and replace the effect with that effect. Also, for the rest of the turn, if your monster attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing damage to your opponent. Next, we have 1 Tripioveratum. Gains attack equal to the total original attack of all other monsters on the field with a Predator counter. You can only use the following effect once per turn. When your opponent special summons a monster or monsters from their extra deck while you control this fusion summon card, you can negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster or monsters. Or if your opponent controls a monster with a Predator counter, you can special summon this card from your graveyard in defense position. Next is 1 Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster on the field until the end of this turn. Change that target's attack to 0. Also, that target has its effects negated. If this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, destroy as many monsters on the field as possible. Then you can banish 1 level 8 or higher dark monster from your graveyard and special summon this card from the graveyard. Next is 1 Starving Venom Preda Power Fusion Dragon. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated, you contribute 1 monster on either field with a Predator counter, and if you do, negate the activation. If this fusion summon card you control is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, you can target 1 dark monster in your graveyard and special summon it. Next is 1 Starving Venomy Dragon. You can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase. This card names becomes that monster's original name, and replace this effect with that monster's original effect. Then that monster loses 500 attack and defense. Its effects are negated. Also, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. If this card is in the monster zone and it is destroyed, you can place this card in your pendulum zone. Now, when this card is in the pendulum zone, each time a card or cards is sent from the field to the graveyard, place 1 Venomy counter on this card for each card sent. All monsters on the field except Dark Dragon monsters lose 200 attack for each Venomy counter on the field. Once per turn, you can reduce the battle damage you take to 0. And to round out the rest of the deck are all Link cards that we all know and love and probably use in almost every deck. We have 1 Link Karibo, 1 Relinquished Anima, 1 Predaplant Verte Anaconda, and 1 Dark the Dark Charmer. So that's it for the pure Predaplant deck list. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe. Also leave in the comments below if you are using Predaplants or if you've never used them, and I would really love to hear from you. And I'll see you in the next one. Later.